Welcome back, everybody, to A Little Less Fear podcast. Today, I would like to introduce Edward Miskie, a newly published author of cancer, musical theater, and other chronic illnesses. Edward is celebrating his 10-year cancer-free anniversary of a rare, aggressive non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. You know what's not talked about in the cancer conversation? What happens to your life during and after treatment? Relationships, careers, wants, needs. What happens to you? You can't go back, so you got to forge forward. The ultimate transformation. Through his own personal story of insanity and indecency, Edward talks about all things survival and getting back on the horse, even if it's a different horse. Among other things, Edward is an actor, a singer, songwriter, and producer. Welcome to A Little Less Fear podcast, Edward.
Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely, a pleasure. So, hey, tell us about your incredible journey. What got you to where you are at today?
Oh my God. Well, the short version of that is, I moved to New York to do pop and musical theater like almost 20 years ago. And that kind of took me around the country singing in shows like from, California to New York, like that I've performed everywhere. And, it kind of got interrupted around the age of 25. I had this huge lump under my arm that just kept growing and growing and growing. And eventually I made it back to New York after that contract was over and was diagnosed with this like really fucked up cancer. And, that derailed everything and really kind of obviously, to say the least, it was a setback. Like, obviously that was a setback.
Oh, yeah, right.
And it was really heartbreaking at the time because I felt like I had some momentum. I was like hot and 25 and I was working and I had casting offices calling me and, they continued to call me during chemo. And I just kept having to say no to them. And I wasn't telling anyone what was going on. So I was just like, oh, I'm really sorry, I'm unavailable. And, then eventually they just stopped calling. And so it just felt like all of these components of my life had just come to a screeching halt. I had friends stop talking to me. I had a boyfriend break up with me. I had career stuff not happen because I was like hooked up to chemo machines for the better part of like 9 months. But it was a really wild ride. And then coming out of it, it was an even wilder ride because it was a whole lot of shit that they don't tell you, that they don't explain to you. Like, you have to rebuild a whole life. And that's not what I think the presumption is when you hear like, oh, someone's cancer free. It's like, oh my God, congratulations. You can just go back to your life now. And like that's it.
Yeah,
it sounds nice.
it does sound nice.
Wouldn't it be lovely if I could just go back to my old life? But yeah, that's not really what happens. And you have to rebuild yourself as basically a new human, like from the ground up. My body was trashed. My mental health was all fucked up. And, I was being told left and right, like, oh, you have to be super careful about certain things. You can't eat certain things. And you have to like really kind of walk on eggshells with yourself for a while. Cause I also had a stem cell transplant. So that adds a totally different layer to the conversation. And it was like for a good almost like 9 months to a year after the fact that I like started to look like myself again. And I still have things that kind of like set me back, but we're over 10 years out now, and like I think I'm okay. Some things happen that like hit a nerve and it's like, ooh, okay, I remember that. And you just have to push past. But it was a really wild ride, like going from like performing all over the country to being in a hospital bed like alone. That was not enjoyable. But then like having to fight twice as hard after the fact. Being a cancer patient's easy, and I'm sure people listening are going to be like, what? It's so easy. Like, yeah, you're sick, you don't feel good, you look like shit, but you have a whole team of people and hopefully a support system of family and friends around you that are there to lift you up. And your medical team tells you where to go, what to do, what time, where to be, how long it's going to take, what to wear, what to eat, what not to eat.
Yeah.
And your friends are there to make sure that you're relatively happy and entertained and taken care of.
Right.
But then once you're like, you get the cancer-free card, like get out of jail free, get out of hospital free card kind of thing, all of that goes away. Except for like the closest of people to you that know like you still need support. Everyone else is like, oh my God, congratulations. And then
they're gone again, huh?
Yeah. And you don't have the same doctor appointment schedule. You don't have the same check-ins. You don't have the same attention to yourself in a way that like you're then just sitting in your apartment like, okay, like I was told I couldn't work because it was too risky with my like immune system compromisation after my stem cell transplant. And so therefore I couldn't audition for things and I couldn't pursue what I wanted to pursue. And so I was just sitting in my apartment like, okay.
And at this point you were what, 26, 27?
I had just turned 26.
Okay. So was it like a good year, a whole year of treatment?
Just about. I got my first round of chemo early December of 2011. And then I was given the cancer-free card October 5th, 2012, 2 days before my birthday. And yeah, we went and partied hard.
So tell us about how you had to rebuild your life. How did that start? Because I know it's baby steps. I mean, to get you, I mean, even just a year after treatment is still a struggle, I can imagine.
Well, and the mental side of that is a much bigger animal than the physical, right? Like
Right.
I went into chemo in the best shape of my life, you know, as it is easy to be when one is 24 years
Yeah.
old, you know. Like 36 now, and I'm finding you just can't hop on an elliptical to lose 10 pounds anymore.
Yeah,
You know,
it's a lot
so
more difficult.
it's a lot more difficult. But yeah, I mean, like certainly the physical component was there, and like, you know, after having been in quarantine in a hospital for like 20 plus days with nothing to do, I mean, like you just waste away to nothing very quickly. And you know, once I was back home, like I was saying, my parents were there. They took turns rotating on the schedule to take care of me. And, you know, my mom and my dad and I would like walk down to the Hudson River, and we would just walk up and down as far as I could. And then there's this huge staircase, right? I lived on 73rd at the time, West 73rd. And there's this huge staircase from the river to street level. And it was just like, nope, I am doing this. And sometimes it would take me forever. And I would just like hold on to the
Almost
rail.
reminds me of like the Rocky.
Yeah, kind of, but much less glamorous.
Yeah.
And very much less attractive.
Oh man.
But yeah, just like a tortoise trying to get up a flight of stairs. But like just crawling and holding onto the railing and going like 6 steps and being completely obliterated and out of breath, and having my mom like stand there and just be like, are you okay? And it's like, yep, I just need a minute. And then you go up like another 6 or 7 steps, and it's like, and I think there's like 50 steps on this thing. So you're like, fuck, why did I choose to do this?
Right.
But yeah, it was wild. I mean, that the physical part of it was tough, and eventually that led me to like joining the big fancy gym, so I felt obligated to go. And
This is after treatment?
after treatment, yeah. And you know, I kind of whipped myself back into some semblance of shape. I look at pictures of me now and I'm like, god damn it, you look good, you know, right after cancer. But you know, I had chemo on my side to keep me skinny. But you know, like the mental health part of it is really the issue that's like, I don't know if it ever really goes away. You know, I definitely have days where I forget it happened, where I'm like, oh right, I was in a hospital for a while. Cool, right. Forgot. But it's just like having this empty kind of lost, like slowly looking around, like what is this world I'm living in right now? Because your whole perspective has changed.
Well, yeah,
Your
everything
mind-
changes. Social media, I mean, friends, connections, everything changes.
Yeah, and you just like don't have a guidebook or guide anything to really kind of like show you like, maybe this will be helpful for you. And like,
Right.
yes, there's therapy, and I did that, and yes, there are support groups, but I didn't want to do that because I didn't want to sit around like whining about my feelings all day long. You know, I wanted like actionable steps, and for me that translated into like going to a gym and working out. But it also translated into drinking my face off and like eating as much food as I possibly could, because I had just spent the last year or so.
When you say drinking your face off, you mean alcohol, or you mean like water?
Yeah, I mean alcohol. I mean,
man.
I say all the time, I drank my way through chemo. It was like a coping
mechanism.
My gosh. Not the smartest thing to do, but I got my doctor's permission, just not to the magnitude that I was doing it. Like,
my gosh.
I left a chemo appointment one day, and I'm honestly surprised that my internal organs just didn't like explode, because I left this appointment. I don't remember what the exact numbers were, but it was a chemo drip and it was outpatient. I was told I was only going to be there for like 4 hours, but that wasn't true. And it ended up having to be 7.5 hours.
Oh man.
And I was like, can we speed this up? Like, I'm good. Like, I'm built like a tank. Like,
Right.
just put it in faster.
Yeah.
And so they clicked it
Mm.
up to like, I think it was 4 or 5 times the actual dose that you're
Oh,
supposed to have it be
damn.
at. So like that could have been real bad. And then after that appointment, I called my oncologist. I was like, look, my friends are at a bar. Like, can I go have a drink? And she's like, yeah, just like 1 or 2, but don't overdo it. And I was like, fuck this bitch. And I went and I had like 15 drinks.
Wow.
Just like bourbon and ginger ale. It wasn't like Manhattans or anything, but like, I had that and like some wings and like queso and whatever the fuck else I had. One of my best friends was the bartender there. And like she took care of us. Like we didn't pay for hardly anything. It was like $10 at the end of the night.
You get sick that night?
No,
Wow.
that's what was so confusing too, because everyone's like, oh, you're going to be in chemo, you're going to be so sick. And I felt terrible, but I
Sure.
never really like had the nausea or like, any kind of like loose bowel movements or anything like that really fucked me up. But like that was the beginning of me drinking through chemo. That was like a like launching night of, it was like, let's become an alcoholic and a cancer patient. Like, let's see how that goes.
Yeah. And how long did you do that for? Party,
how
party,
how
party with
long how
cancer.
long was I in chemo?
Oh man.
I think that was only like round 2 that I started that. So I at least got through the first 2 rounds of chemo without like, trying to sabotage my life. But
Yeah.
once radiation started, I didn't have chemo anymore. I started to feel better, I started to look better. And so I, kept drinking, but it got better after that. It was just like that period of time that was really rough, that none of the doctors knew what they were doing. And they were kind of transparent with me about that, which in some way I appreciated. And in other ways, it was like, I have zero confidence in anything you tell me. And then eventually we ended up switching hospitals because of that. And that hospital was the one that ended up saving my life. But it was wild. I did absolutely everything I could to not live through it, and I still did. So
during
yeah,
that
add it
time
up.
you were trying not to live through it?
Not on purpose. I don't want to, I say that like,
You
very,
mean just
very,
not going through it and like going through all the motions and all the emotions and the just kind
yeah,
of
yeah.
like,
I say that very flippantly, and I do
okay,
not mean that I was like suicidal or trying to take my own life, but I
sure,
was definitely self-sabotage patterns.
right,
Like I was like, chemo and alcohol, like let's put the liver to the test,
right, right.
and it just was kind of like anything to feel normal
Mm-hmm.
in a time that was like, there was nothing normal about it. Like I
Right.
looked like I looked more like Mitch McConnell than I looked like myself, like, and I was 25. So, it was the real, one of the real things that fucked me up during that time, like mentally speaking,
Mm-hmm.
was a radiation appointment I had early on. I was still getting to know the team. I was seeing them every day. So like, they got to know me too. And the one tech asked me what I did for a living, and I told him I was an actor, and he was like, oh, like anything I would have seen. I was like, no, not really, whatever. And so I pulled up an old picture of me in a show or a headshot or something, and I showed it to them, and he was like, oh my God. And he took my phone and he showed it to the other techs in the room, and the one girl was like, oh my God, that's you.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, oh,
Mm-hmm.
well, it was.
Yeah. Oh man.
Yeah, it was bad. And so that was kind of another launching point of like, I was already drinking at that point, and then I went home and tried to like hook up with absolutely every person in my zip code just to like feel pretty, because I was like, make me feel pretty again.
Yeah, you were just kind of looking for ways to fill that empty void.
Literally, I mean,
Yeah.
literally fill the empty void.
Mhm.
It was not a great position to be in. But again, like this is why I
What
like
is
to
that empty void
this
though,
is
Edward? The empty void of what was
of
that empty void for you? What was
the
empty?
empty void was loss.
Mhm.
Like it really kind of was. I view it as like mourning the life that I had prior,
That
and
makes sense.
like not really understanding that that's what it was, but knowing somehow that like the person I used to be is
Mhm.
gone. Like it's a death, like
Right. So you were
I
grieving basically.
essentially, yeah.
Mhm.
And grieving and coping and trying to get through the day.
Mhm.
um and some of the circumstances I got myself into were pretty funny in hindsight. They weren't funny at the time, but in hindsight they're funny.
Mhm.
um but it was a lot. It's a shitstorm. You have no compass whatsoever, and you just want to rage because you're angry and you're sad and you're scared and you are. I was never physically alone. I always had friends or family nearby, but I felt very alone
Sure.
because, like we were saying kind of before we started, like you don't know anyone else who's gone through this. So you don't have any kind of reference or any kind of blueprint to be able to point to and be like, that's what it's going to be like.
Mhm.
Like you're literally forging the road forward. And as a sole survivor too, like I'm still, as far as I know, the blueprint for cases after mine. And that's terrifying.
Mhm. Yeah.
Like if something would happen and God forbid it would come back, like how fucked am I? Like am I? Have there been enough advances in this that like I'd be okay? But you don't know. It's a
What
lot to take
what made
on.
the cancer that you had be so rare?
So it's called rare and large B-cell Burkitt's like non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, and the typical demographic for that to appear in is children under 10 who live in Africa. And it's related to the Epstein-Barr virus, I think, in some way, if I remember correctly. But it at the time, I think only had somewhere around like 9 to 1,200 cases reported worldwide, and
Whoa.
in the United States, it was way, way low.
Mhm.
I did get to meet one other person who had the same cancer, and they had a reoccurrence at 8 years. And so, like, what makes my sole survivorship status really interesting is that not only am I the only person to live this long who has had this cancer, I'm also the only person to live this long who has not had a reoccurrence.
Mhm.
So it's like, cool.
What do you think has helped for you? What do you think has helped you to have, 10-year cancer free and not have a reoccurrence?
I have no idea. We don't know how we don't know how I got this in the first place. Like I
Mhm.
stopped using like medical grade antiperspirant because the tumor was under my arm. And so I thought maybe something happened with that. I
Sure.
was taking like vitamins that were like immune system boosters and stuff like that. So I
Yeah.
immediately stopped those.
Mhm.
I was taking Propecia at the time because I was terrified of losing my hair, and
Mhm.
I stopped taking that. Like there's just a whole bunch of stuff that I was like, stop putting things in your body that you don't know what it is.
Exactly.
Um, because I didn't know. How could I know?
Right, right, right.
The doctors didn't know. So like something that would have helped me between then and now to not have a reoccurrence, like I don't know. Like
Mhm.
if I think if we did know, we wouldn't have done it in the first place.
Sure,
You
sure,
know?
sure. But you do know the changes that you've made that have helped you up to this point, though.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, yes. I've kind of gotten off the drinking train, which is great.
That is great.
I go through
Congratulations.
Thanks. I go through pockets. I'll do like 100 days and then I'll like not, and then I'll do like 200 days and then I'll not. And that's new. That's like pandemic culture. I like
Yeah.
went real hard at the beginning of shutdown and then didn't.
Yeah.
But yeah, and like just kind of trying to be more conscious of like my mental health versus my physical health. Not that either or are more and or less
Mhm.
important, but it kind of hit me a couple years out that even though I was physically like looking pretty good, like I wasn't mentally okay. Like
Mhm.
the hypochondriac in me was like on like not cloud nine, sorry, on like level 10 all the time.
Mhm.
Like the littlest bump, the littlest scrape, the littlest thing, I was like, is that gonna heal fast enough? Like, is this something else?
Mhm.
Because another thing, and I know like with your situation being in a rare category as well, like
Yeah.
I had other people around me at the same time who were going through similar treatments that were friends and they didn't make it. And
Mhm.
so there's like this whole, I don't want to call it survivor's guilt, because like I think I'm pretty cool with that. Like again, we talked about the Catholic thing, like guilt, I don't have it anymore because I
Yeah.
let go of it.
Yeah, that's good. That's really good.
I don't feel bad about anything. Um, that's not true, but you know what I mean.
Right.
Uh, and so like I actually had someone who was relatively close pass who was going through a stem cell transplant at the same time as me.
Wow.
And I just was like, oh my God, that's so devastating to hear. I'm so sorry. And his partner was like, why did it have to be him and it couldn't be you?
Ooh.
which like that sounds like shit, but I fully understand where that's coming from.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, that's not great. It's not great. It wasn't great to hear, but like, yeah, of course, like they had been together for like 22 years.
Mm-hmm.
So like, of course he would wish that I was gone. Like I compared to that, I'm inconsequential. I'm just a body.
Sure.
Yeah.
How'd you respond to that?
I think I shut it down. I was like, okay. I was like, I know you're upset right now, and I'm so sorry of what happened, but like
Mhm.
my circumstances have absolutely nothing to do with those circumstances. Um, you know, and every so often they'll message me on Facebook and say hi, and we'll have like a cordial little back and forth. And I don't want to say that it altered or changed or ruined our friendship, but it definitely was the thing that was like, oof, wow,
Mm-hmm.
those words come out way too easy.
Oh yeah, for sure, definitely.
Yeah. But I mean, you know, as far as like what has helped me get from where I was at the cancer free point to now, like, I mean, it sounds so, I'm going to hate myself for even saying it, and because it sounds so trite, but like really it's like humor and enjoying your life and
Yeah.
being able to laugh at shit, you know, like,
Yes.
and like I don't want to be one of those like those fucking people that are like laughter is the best medicine, but like it really did help.
It really is though. You know what? I was sick with COVID a month ago and I started watching Looney Tunes and I was cracking up. And it'd been at least 20 years since I'd seen Looney Tunes. I mean, I was watching Bugs Bunny. I was like, man, he's fucking hilarious, Bugs Bunny. Like dressing up
Yeah.
like Carmen Miranda with like, I don't know. He was cracking me up and I started feeling really, really good. And I was like, you know what? Yes, that is a cliche, but it's a true cliche that laughter really is the best medicine.
It totally is. And it's just like, you know, again, I don't want to sound like a total, like, you know, trite kind of cliche, but, you know, I remember very clearly, very specific days during that time that I had friends over either to my apartment or to my hospital room, and we were just carrying on. Like I was the fun room to be in at on the cancer ward. Like the nurses would make their rounds and we would be the last room because we were having fun, you know. And like that's like what a hard place to be as a nurse, like the cancer ward.
Oh yeah.
Jesus, like ugh. But you know, we would be the last stop because we were carrying on and being fucking ridiculous. And I'm sure that every single person on that floor was like, God, will he just die already? Like, I just want peace.
Oh man, that's hilarious.
But
And
yeah,
so
I mean, it's just like creating those memories around something so horrible, because like our brains naturally romanticize things, like even, you know, like the Stockholm syndrome of it all, where
yeah,
like you go through something traumatic and you're like, oh, but I loved him, or like whatever the scenario is,
sure.
you know, your brain immediately wants to put on those rose-colored glasses and think the best of the situation that you've been in.
Mm,
And when you're going through something traumatic like that and life altering like that, like being
mm,
able to have those moments to actually point to and be like, no, that was a really fun day. You know,
right.
oh, remember the time I like tried to order 4 pizzas from the hospital kitchen and they told me to fuck off and I told them I was dying and they sent them anyway. Like that was a fun night. I just saw that friend today. We were had such a good laugh about it. But you know, it really is just like being able to make the best of a situation, which again sounds such like, "Ugh," but it's true. You
It
really
is
do.
true. It's
Yeah.
absolutely true.
And I'm sure for you, I mean, like you've been through a hell of a lot more than I have. So like when you were in like surgeries and things, like did you have like friends come and like kind of prop you up and like celebrate
I did. You
around
know,
you?
one of
And
my good friends actually, yesterday was his second year of passing, and I went to the cemetery to visit him, and all our fam, all his family and friends were there, and I had a really good memory because his friends were reminding me how he was always there for me when I was in the hospital. And I said, yeah, you know, one of my best memories I have is he came to visit me and we made sock puppets. I'd never made sock puppets before. And he was there for like 6 hours with me. We were cracking up. We were like putting little googly eyes on the puppets. It was so much fun. And like these tiny little memories, they stay ingrained, and they uplifted my soul in those times that were really tough for me and lonely. So yeah, I've got some great memories in the hospital actually.
yeah, I mean, and they're so important. And I again, like it like makes me want to barf just even saying it, but it's so true. Like you have to find those like shiny, sparkly moments in like the worst part, because like
Exactly.
that's better to point back to
It
than have
is.
this like false memory of like, oh, I was hooked up to a bunch of machines, but it wasn't that bad. The nurses were really nice.
Yeah, right.
Like, okay.
Yeah.
Like, I'd rather be like, do you remember the pizza party night where I screamed at the kitchen? Like,
Oh man, I have some good memories. I remember this one guy, this old, and I, and my heart breaks for people that have, dementia or Alzheimer's. But this man, I believe he had dementia next to me, and I felt bad because the first hour or two he'd be like, "Well, where am I? Well, where am I?" And I was like, "Oh man, my heart would break, my poor guy." But then it would make me laugh because the nurse would be like, "You're in the hospital," and he would be like, "Well, the hell with you." And he would say that would be like his answer all the time. Well, the hell with you. And for some reason that would make me crack up. Like he didn't know that. I mean, and it sucks that he was struggling, but his pain was kind of funny. Like there were funny parts to his personality that really cracked me up. Oh, I wish him well. I really
oh
wish
yeah.
him well.
There
But
was
yeah, little memories like that.
yeah, totally. And I mean, this I don't know this person and I never saw them again. But there was a family. One of the times that I was checked in onto the urology floor because there was no room on the cancer
Oh, that's
room
the floor
floor.
I was
So
always on, urology.
yeah, so I was on urology, and there was this very tall, young, good-looking man there who had, I think, he had testicular cancer and he had one of them removed. And so he had like all of these tubes coming out of him, and he had a
Oh yeah.
walker, and he was trying to figure out how to walk again. And both of his parents were there. And like, in on all of these floors, there's like, the water cooler area where there's like a little fridge and like there's drinks and stuff that you can get or whatever. And so I was walking over there one day and the mom came around and I was like, hey, like, how are you? You doing okay? She's like, oh yeah, my son, like whatever, he's just, and foot and mouth, it's like my worst quality. But she was like talking about what happened and how like he had to have, his balls removed, or one of them. And I just said to her, I was like, well, I guess you have 50%. What did I say? It was like, I guess you have a 50% chance less of worrying that he's going to knock up the wrong person.
Oh.
And I thought I was so funny. And she just was like, just looked at me. She had no idea what
Like,
to do. And I was
yeah.
like, cool, I'll see myself out. Thank you so
Yeah.
much. I'm just
You're
going to go
like,
back
I'm
to
out
my
of
room
here.
now.
Never mind. Never mind about
Like,
that.
you're like, just don't talk to people in the hospital. Just, like me
Yeah.
specifically, just shut the fuck up.
Oh yeah, I learned that too. I most of the time I did have rooms by myself, but the times that I did share, I realized it was best just to not say anything. Because I mean, if you're able to have the ability to chuckle or make a joke and stuff, most likely, I mean, not everybody can do that when they're struggling and suffering. It's really hard to do for a lot of people. A lot of people start to identify with their pain and start thinking they are their pain and start suffering with their pain. But the truth of it all is, the very truth is, just because you're in pain doesn't mean you have to be suffering. And just because you're suffering doesn't mean you have to be in pain. And that's the stuff that's going to keep people going and motivated and to keep going in life. Just realize that you are not your pain.
Yeah. And you are also in control of how you deal with your circumstances. Like,
Absolutely.
something like this could have happened and I could have just absolutely let it take over me.
Yes.
Um, and
Yes.
and I kind of knew that in the beginning. And so it was a thing that I had asked of the close friends that I told, because again, I didn't tell everyone. It was just family and close friends. And I just said to them, I was like, please keep me functioning, and I didn't mean functioning like walking, although that was helpful, but it was like, keep me going, like keep me entertained, keep me laughing. Like I said to everyone, I was like, I want Disney and rainbows in my room. I do not care if you need to cry, step outside. I don't want to see it. I do not care.
Yeah.
And like I was grateful that they were all there, but like I couldn't handle having people crying in my room. Like I didn't need to watch my funeral happen in front of
Oh
me.
yeah. Yeah,
So
that's tough.
yeah, so like just having everyone around me and being silly and having fun, like that was a requirement of my hospital room. Like it was known by everyone. I was like, this is a fun place, this is a fun space, this is how this is going to go down. And it kind of just like habitually carried on, even when things were really bad.
Totally agree. I mean, I've had, multiple people cry too in my room, and I just couldn't handle that. At that point, I'm like, hey, I'm not crying. That's how I felt, like, hey, I'm not crying. I'm still here, and
Yeah.
and I'm just so grateful. My roommate, he came to visit me a couple of times. I remember once it was during Christmas time, and we are watching Saturday Night Live, and it was so hard for me to laugh, Edward. I had like stitches down my belly. I had like 6 tubes out of me, and any type of laughter just freaking hurt. But I still laugh. He still put it on Saturday Night Live, and that night was like "Pimp Out Your Christmas Tree," and it was ridiculous. I was like, "What the hell, pimp out your Christmas tree?" And I remember like the Christmas tree trunk had like a high heel with like an anklet around the
Oh
trunk.
my
Like yeah, they
God.
were pimping out the Christmas trees. And he was cracking up so hard, and just seeing him cracking up at this ridiculous Saturday Night Live episode made just brighten me up. I mean, I was in a lot of pain, but it didn't even matter at that moment. As painful as it was to laugh, it was just really gratifying just to know that we could watch something stupid like that and just make my day in the hospital.
Yeah, I mean, you live for those moments, right? Like you have to
Sure.
have them. It's so important. And like, you know, my circumstances are not even comparable to yours, but like other things externally happened to me during that period of time. Like I'd mentioned, like I had someone break up with me in the middle of chemo,
Oof.
like over the
Yeah.
phone, like while I'm sitting in a hospital room. It was the night
Oh
of the
no.
Tony Awards, and I was just sitting in a room with my mom, and they called, and I was like, what? Like, and and I just kind of went back to my room and watched the Tony Awards. Like it was very surreal.
Yeah.
Um, but and like that one of my closest friends stopped talking to me after I told them that I had cancer, and like I still haven't spoken to them really again. So like it's just the weird things that happen along the way that kind of
Yeah.
like you run the risk of that darkening the doorway,
Hmm.
and you really have to just fight through it
Oh
and
yeah, definitely.
make the decision. You have to make the decision that you aren't going to let it ruin your every day. Like you're going to have bad days, and I'm not saying like be like, oh
Sure,
my
of
god, I'm
course.
totally fine every
Right.
single day. Like no one wants that toxic shit.
Yeah.
But being able to like purposefully make good happen in the bad
Totally. Oh
is
yeah.
a special skill, and it will serve you better during a situation like this than not.
Absolutely. Hey, tell us about your incredible book. I love the title, by the way.
Thank you.
You're a newly published author, cancer, musical theater, and other chronic illnesses. That sounds incredible.
Yeah, I can't take credit for the title. That was one of my best friends,
Okay.
Alex. I couldn't figure out a title, and he just randomly said to me one day, he just was like, well, I mean, like cancer, musical theater, and other chronic illnesses. And I was like, that's it.
Oh yeah, I love
So
how that rings.
he is credited in the notes for coming up with that. That was not my doing. I'm not that smart. And he was there for me a lot too. He was one of the people that came by. So he lived through the whole thing too. But yeah, the book is I kind of call it the funny as cancer can be musical theater fever dream that is like what it's like to be a patient and a survivor. Um it's a heightened nonfiction, right? So it's like I call it a fantasy nonfiction as well, because
Mhm.
what ends up happening is like you follow me along on the road to becoming a cancer patient, and every chapter that you're in is a different musical. So
Wow.
all the people and the doctors and the nurses and whomever you meet are characters from that musical. And then if one of those doctors like sticks with me through the end, then they remain that good doctor. They don't change characters. So you have this like cross section of like characters that don't belong in certain musicals there, because it's like this weird, like eerie, but funny kind of like, why are these people here? Like, do you remember the movie Big Fish?
Yeah, that's a great movie.
So it's kind of like at the very end when all the characters from all the stories come up
Yeah.
at the funeral, and they're all there, and you're like, and you were there, and you were there, and you were
Yeah,
there.
yeah.
That was kind of like what was going through my head as I dragged these characters that didn't belong in certain stories through those like timelines. Um, and that sounds very like esoteric and avant-garde, and I guess in some ways it is. And you don't need to like theater to appreciate that or understand it, but that is just forewarning how the book is formatted.
Man, Edward, what about making that into a musical?
I'm actually turning it into a musical TV show right now. So
Excellent.
yeah,
Yeah.
so we're working on the script and music. Some of the music is done, well, done-ish. And I'm just gonna kind of spend the rest of the summer polishing that up a little bit. And then I would like to be in pre-production by the fall. Um, yeah, we're going full throttle on it. Going all the way. It's going to be like Crazy Ex-Girlfriend, but for cancer
I
instead of
fucking
mental
love it.
health.
I love it. I can't wait to watch it. That's incredible.
Yeah, thank you. So a lot of people who have read it have been like, "Oh my god, this needs to be a one-man show." But if I have to watch one fucking more one-man show, like I'm not going to put that on people. So it's going to be a musical TV show that's what we're doing with it. I'm really excited about it. The music we have so far is just hysterical, and it's all satire and parody, and like it's
It sounds
so
fun.
yeah, it's going to be well, again, as fun as cancer can be.
Sure. Right.
Yeah, just kind of like a dark farce, I guess is the best
I
way to
love
put
the
it.
twist, though. I mean, I haven't really seen many or heard many with twists like this.
There aren't any.
Yeah.
No, I mean there might be, but this is, it
Sure.
doesn't matter if there is or there isn't. This is just how I want to do it.
And that's what's going to make it beautiful and awesome and incredible and innovative. I love it.
Fingers crossed. Yes. I need to stop saying that. Yes, that is exactly what it is going to be. Correct. Thank you.
Totally. Edward, I have a question. If you were to go back 10 years to one of your darkest cancer days, knowing what you know now, having the wisdom that you have now, the confidence that you have now, knowing where you're going, what would you tell yourself? You could take a time machine right now to one of those hospital days. What would you tell yourself? You're going to see 25-year-old Edward.
Yeah, well, what a mess he was. I don't know if I would tell him anything. I think my first instinct is to say something like, tell him, oh, it's going to be okay.
Mm-hmm.
But like, I think on some level I knew that.
Mm-hmm.
Or felt it, because it never, like, as bad as things ever got, I couldn't actually get myself to believe that it was the end. I had moments where I was like, God, this is the fucking end? Like, what an embarrassment I've been.
Oh man.
I just mean like acting a fool and whatnot. But
Oh, I see.
Yeah, like, but if I would go back and tell him anything and make him know something that he didn't know, most of what's happened in the last 10 years wouldn't have happened. And like, as like the last 10 years have not been perfect.
Sure.
And would I like to be in a different place right now? Maybe, sure. But like, it's that idea of like, you're exactly where you are now to get where you want to go.
Right.
Changing anything about that scenario, like, I wouldn't be sitting here, arguably.
That's so true.
So it's like the Back to the Future thing. Like, don't talk to your mother.
Yeah, I love those movies.
Right. But it's very much like that. Like, you can't change anything on your timeline
Right.
because you wouldn't be where you are now. And so going back, like, I don't know if I would. I think I'd maybe watch from afar and maybe have a chuckle and maybe be like, you need to stop being a dumbass.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think I would actually do anything differently.
Would you give yourself anything? A hug or a handshake or a gift or anything?
Maybe a backhand. Like, put the bottle down.
Oh man, that's hilarious. I love it. Edward, where can this has been an amazing, I love your energy, by the way. This has been awesome. Thank you so much for being on A Little Less Fear podcast. Where can our viewers, our watchers, and our listeners find you and your book? If they need to get a hold of you on social media or email you or get a copy of your book?
Sure. I mean, socials are just at Edward Miskie on everything: TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. And the book is available at Barnes & Noble. It's available at Walmart. It's available at Apple Books. It's on Amazon. There is an audiobook coming up soon. I have been working on it forever. Audiobooks are harder than I anticipated. That's my bad.
That's what I hear. That's what I hear.
I was like, oh, I'll crank this out in a day. Absolutely not.
No.
But yeah, that's the gist of it. Barnes & Noble is my favorite. So that's my preference that everyone goes to, because I have deep old New York ties to Barnes & Noble, but do what you want. But that's, I'm very proud of the fact that it's a Barnes & Noble.
Edward Miskie, everybody, on A Little Less Fear podcast, newly published author of Cancer, Musical Theater, and Other Chronic Illnesses. Thank you so much for sharing your love, light, your energy, your wisdom, your motivation. You're inspiring, you're funny, you're incredible. And I look forward to seeing your awesome musical series that you have coming up. I wish you all the best, you and all your loved ones.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Edward.
Thank you.